Episode 12, Onboarding in a Digital Age, Creating Connection from Afar. Welcome to HR Decoded, the podcast where we uncomplicate the people problems breaking your business. I'm your host, Annekah, fractional COO and People Ops Strategist. And today we're talking about onboarding in the digital age and how to create connection, clarity, and confidence for new hires, even when you're not in the same room. Okay, let's talk about the truth behind remote onboarding. It's either a strategic advantage or a quiet disaster. And the difference isn't the tools you use, it's how intentional you are about designing the experience. Because in a remote environment, you don't have the casual desk chats, team lunches, or in-person walkthroughs to build belonging. You have to essentially manufacture connection. I know that sounds disingenuous, but it's the reality, or you risk losing your new hires' engagement before they've even gotten to the first team meeting. So, why does remote onboarding feel so hard? Let's just call it out. I mean, everyone's on Zoom overload, teams are stretched thin, founders are juggling 100 priorities, and onboarding simply just becomes a checklist. It's not an experience. But here's what you need to know. A new hire decides within the first 2 to 3 weeks whether they feel like they belong. If they don't, you'll see it in low engagement, quiet quitting, or early exits. So, before I give you my best practice tips, I want to make sure we're all on the same page about what great remote onboarding actually is supposed to accomplish. There are 3 things. Number 1, it creates clarity so that people can say, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. Number 2, it builds confidence so people can feel like they're set up for success. And 3, it establishes connection so people can say, I know who my people are. Now, some people call them cliques or tribes, but really people have their people and need their people at work, even in remote settings. But back to what onboarding is supposed to accomplish. Just remember, it's not about perfection, it's about intention. Now, let's go over some quick best practice tips that I have for remote onboarding. And our goal with these is to make onboarding simple, scalable, and a little bit more human. Firstly, my first tip is that onboarding needs to start before day 1. Okay, this is really important. It needs to start before day 1. Send a welcome email 3 to 5 days before the start date. You can include, a warm message from the founder or the team, a brief overview of what to expect on their first day. Provide them with access to any logins like their Gmail accounts. I can't tell you how many times people have gotten to their first day and didn't know what time they were supposed to start or what meeting they were supposed to attend because they weren't sent access to their email or their calendars beforehand. And with that said, make sure the meetings are on their calendar before their start date. This is a coordination thing. I personally, with my HR teams, I would have them create the employees' email calendars, get their schedule from the hiring managers ahead of time, and pre-set up all meetings and invites in their new hire accounts so that when they logged in for the first time into their emails, their schedule for the entire first week or 2 was already set. I also would forward them any intro materials that they may need. If there are, Google Docs or Notion links or Confluence docs that they should read, during their first week to really help them, onboard quickly into like systems, tools, SOPs, whatever it may be, add that to the welcome email so that they can get a jump on it, especially because there's going to be a lot of downtime in between meetings. I highly doubt, and if you are doing this, I would strongly encourage you not to do this, but I highly doubt that they are in, back-to-back meetings all day, their first day or their first week. And so they have a lot of downtime to read. That's the perfect time for them to get onboarded with whatever internal, documents they have that would be helpful to them. Also, I would put together, if you have time, this is optional. This is kind of going above and beyond, but, put together some sort of like get to know us deck. meeting new people on a team is extremely hard to do over Zoom. So anything that could be done to aid people, in their comfortability, getting to know people on the team ahead of time, finding something they may have in common, it really helps remove anxiety and helps make your company seem extremely prepared and extremely thoughtful. So that's all just my number one tip. Make sure that onboarding starts before the first day. It really sets the tone for how they're going to come in, right? And then my second tip, number two, is to build a 30, 60, 90 onboarding plan, roadmap, whatever you want to call it. I cannot stress enough how important this step is. Listen, I can tell you, I have gotten into many back and forths with managers and leaders out over this particular step. And I think those of you who've been listening for a while to this podcast, or if you know me in person, I'm a straight shooter. I tell people what they need to hear, not just what they want to hear. And so I have no problem giving very direct feedback to managers and leaders, particularly about 30, 60, 90 onboarding plans. Because here's my position. If you cannot, or your manager cannot tell you what someone should be accomplishing in their first 30, 60, 90 days, you don't need to be hiring. This is essentially a non-negotiable requirement for my companies that I'm the head of HR operations for, internally in the companies that I own, with hiring teams. You do not get to start a new hire, or better yet, you won't even get to launch a rec for recruiters to recruit for a role if this isn't done. Why? And the people might be like, "Oh my gosh, that's harsh. That's a lot." It's not. And the reason why I say that is because new hires need clarity. Almost all of my, discussions that I've had on this podcast or in my blogs or in the tools that I provide people is starting with clarity. And if you, or say that a new hire is hired, right? And they come in, do you know how crazy the organization looks, or a hiring manager looks, or a team looks, or you're disorganized that you look when someone is sitting there for the first month and they're twiddling their thumbs all day because there's really no clear understanding what they're supposed to be doing? That is a waste of time and resources. And most of my clients, most of you that are listening, are in the early startup stage, and you do not have the resources to waste. So don't let somebody just sit there twiddling their thumbs. Have a plan and be very clear, what are they supposed to be doing for the first 30, 60, 90 days, right? And I'm going to go over really quick what this would entail, because once you hear what I'm asking for and what I'm recommending you do, you may see very quickly that this isn't overwhelming, okay? So days 1 through 7, this is simply orientation, team intros, and light shadowing, okay? This is a light lift. It's just to get people acclimated to the environment, understand who the players are, and learn, about processes, procedures, that sort of thing. So it's a light lift, just shadowing a few people, asking questions, and just getting acclimated to the team. Days 8 through 30, okay? Yes, 8 through 30. This is any initial projects they might be able to participate on, not lead, just jump on and be able to help out. Any async documentation, structured feedback. This is them kind of just getting their feet wet, learning management styles, receiving, light feedback on where to take initiative and where not to. Also, they're learning the dynamics of the team and where they fit in. So their first, 3 weeks or so is really just kind of initially getting their feet wet, and you kind of providing them with an overview of, what type of projects or what projects they might just kind of need to get in, learn about, what the goals are of that project, and seeing where they might be able to, lend a hand, lend feedback, or just kind of, give input in any way. Then we get to 31 to 60 days, right? This is when they could start taking ownership of tasks, maybe not complete projects, but ownership of tasks and really, starting to get their first wins. This is where the new hire should be, receiving very clear measures of success on tasks that you give them. This is the manager's chance to really assess their true, role and team fit, also their leveling on the role, etc. This also is a make it or break it from the employee's perspective to see if they're is a role and company fit for them. So we need to make sure that during this time period, they are set up for success. They shouldn't still be looking for SOPs, or waiting for access to tools. All of those things should be done, and they should really start being able to, run on their own. I also want to point out that they should be receiving very clear feedback on their work, on the tasks that you give them. Do not wait until a performance review cycle to let someone know if they are on the right track, especially someone in their first 90 days. Typically, when a new hire comes in, it's very rare that it lines up perfectly with a feedback cycle. And I've worked for organizations where if you're in your first 90 days, they completely skip you. They don't even give you feedback. And so somebody could essentially go 9 months to a year without receiving any sort of formalized, performance review. And so you have to remember that new hires, they don't know what they don't know. And it can add unnecessary stress to a new person who really doesn't know someone's personalities, their cues, their facial expressions, and they don't really have the ability to gauge on their own how they're doing in the eyes of a manager or somebody who's giving them feedback. So it's really important in the first, or in this, 31 to 60 day time period that they're receiving some sort of constructive feedback, light feedback, okay? And then we get to just the 61 to 90 days, right? So now we are 3 months in, they should be fully integrated into systems, be considered a trusted contributor. This means their role is fully scoped by this point. The responsibilities, the tasks, the projects that they should be on, or are able to be on, are well known at this point. Be very clear what they should be owning and delivering, essentially. And remember, 30, 60, 90s are flexible, right? So just going back to my point earlier where I said I personally would not even launch a rec for recruiters if I didn't have this. 30, 60, 90s are flexible. They're subject to change. The projects that you're working on when a new hire is hired are going to be adjusted. So it's just important that you're able to create a 30, 60, 90 plan, that you can pull things out, plug, drop new things in, and have a very clear idea of where you would expect them to be at that point of reaching 90 days, and making sure that there is consensus about that, especially with the people they work with or other managers who engage with these new hires. And why I'm calling that out is I've read a few 30, 60, 90 outlines where by the end of 90 days, it read like a person was supposed to be able to solve world hunger, at that 90-day point. And that's just not realistic. So being able to see it on written out, on paper and have a visual really helps set realistic expectations, right? So overall, this step really prevents the new hire from being overwhelmed and helps them build momentum, and also helps your teams and managers integrate someone new into the fold without confusion. Okay. All right. So let's keep moving on. I want to get over to tip number 3. This is important. This used to be really, really, really common early days in my career, and people stopped doing it, but it really is helpful. Okay. My tip number 3 is to assign a workplace buddy, not just a manager, an actual peer, another IC, another individual contributor, another employee, if you have them. If you don't, you're still in the early stages and you don't really have that, you could skip this one, but I highly recommend you bring this into the fold when you start to grow. Get a new hire connected to another employee fast. Okay. This creates a sort of social stickiness. Okay. If you remember earlier, I said people need their workplace people, they need their people at work, Another peer can answer informal questions, be a culture translator, make new hires feel seen outside of just their job scope. Um, Something I think people have a hard time admitting is that remote work can be very isolating. It can be very lonely. And I could tell you from experience, I have worked remote for years. I mean, I would say at this point, maybe 10 years, I should say I've been remote. Even before remote was, the thing to do. Pre-COVID, I was remote. And I've also been a digital nomad for years where I've traveled around the world alone, and I was working full time the entire time. And while it's really wonderful, very flexible to be at home, and being able to be with my family, I also have a little kiddo, and it's cool to be able to, go to their, little programs and things like that. When you don't have somebody you're working with to go to lunch with every day, to just kind of shoot the breeze with, it could be very lonely, and very isolating. And so having someone at work, and having that kind of built-in buddy is very helpful. I've had them at every organization, and it's been really awesome because I still talk to all of them, right? Even though I don't work with them anymore, I still have weekly 30-minute, 1 hour catch-ups with my buddies, my workplace buddies that I, found at each of my remote companies. And it's really, really been great to not feel as isolated. And so I would highly recommend that you get them connected with somebody quickly, because that will help them, just feel more comfortable and help them, stay connected to the organization. Okay. Um, all right, let's go on to number 4. My fourth tip here is to design your onboarding plan for over communication. So, in a physical office, okay, context is ambient, right? In a remote org, it has to be designed. This means you have to schedule weekly onboarding check ins, have very clear documentation, and please, on everything that you cherish, okay, on everything that you cherish. Do not, okay, do not make them slack hunt for answers. They don't know where to find stuff. And I have seen people go, oh, just go to search and search for the name of a document. Well, what if the document's not named that, or there's a misspelling, or something like that? Don't do that. Don't make them hunt for everything. Create Loom videos, visuals, internal wiki pages that are easy to find. Also, again, create shared calendars for onboarding events or meetings that are recurring, learning blocks for them to just go and explore and point them in the right direction. This really makes it almost impossible for a new hire to feel lost, right? That's what you want. You want them to feel like they have the hang of things, that they know where to go to look for things and get something done, and not have to like DM or Slack message the entire team just to find anything, right? Okay, and then my last tip, this is number 5, is to celebrate early wins publicly. Now, I know some people, especially, generations millennials and, Generation X and, baby boomers might be like, okay, we're not going to sit up here and give out participation trophies. I get it, right? But you're remote, you're not in office, right? I touched on this in the 30, 60, 90 plan. Your new hires need to know that they are on the right track. They do not know you, right? Context is everything. They don't know your personality. They don't know how to read the room, right? This room is new to them. And so they need to know whether or not they are headed in the right path, or everyone thinks they're crazy. So don't be afraid to shout them out in Slack and celebrate, a successful first week, them completing the task. Just give a shout out like, hey, so-and-so's new to the team. They're already jumping in. They're already, getting their feet wet. And let them present something. Let them present, something low-hanging fruit. excuse me, in, a team stand-up during week number 2. Have the founder DM them after the first week to see how things are going and cheer them on and, let them know, hey, heard some good feedback, glad you're a part of the team. This helps go a long way. And ultimately, the biggest takeaway that I want you to get from this tip is that recognition builds retention, especially in remote environments. Even though people are not working in the same building, they still need to feel seen. That is extremely important. So, heed my advice on this. I won't say heed my warning, but it is a warning. If you don't do it, you do run the risk of people feeling disconnected, lost, or just unclear and unsure of where they are in and how they're doing on the team. And really quick, I want to give a couple of little notes about things to try to avoid when it comes to onboarding. Number one, don't dump everything on the first day. I know some people, some people are like, hey, I want to give them everything, right away. Don't do that. The first day is already overwhelming enough. Spread it out. Create a plan, each day, drop little nuggets, one by one until they have everything within their first 5 days. Let's try that. Number 2, don't assume they'll figure it all out, because they won't. I know everyone has, those couple of employees that were new hires and kind of jumped right in and figured things out, and they're go-getters, and they're, I would say they're the Virgos of the group. I'm a Virgo, and it's Virgo season, and it makes me laugh when I hear that. They're the ones who kind of like jump in, if you guys, believe in, all of those things. But, they'll just figure it out. Everyone is not like that. Some people need, that little extra support and context. They are just not the ones who jump in and, just figure it all out right away. Don't assume that. Number 3, don't over rely on HRS platforms without any human touch points. I see this a lot, especially with onboarding things like benefits. People are like, oh, they'll get an automated message from the system and be able to just register and get their benefits. That's great. It also would be nice if somebody from your HR department went over it with them to give them insight information about, things that require context. For example, they may get something about medical, dental, and vision, but if you're paying like cell phone stipends or office stipends, those are not inherently in HRIS system notifications. You do have to tell them that and how to obtain it, whether it's reimbursement or it's auto applied to their paycheck. So that's just an example. And lastly, don't let your managers handle it all alone, okay? Onboarding is a company responsibility. It's not just an HR task. It's not just a manager task. It's a company task. And so you need to ensure that the company is involved with onboarding. Everyone has a part to play in that. So don't just put it on one department, one manager, or just HR. Make sure that everyone is involved if you can, or all the players that need to be involved are involved. Okay. All right. So those are my tips. I hope they were helpful. I hope you wrote them down. And if you have questions, feel free to comment, send me a message, send me an email at info@hrdecoded.pro. And remember, remote onboarding doesn't have to feel robotic or chaotic. With a little intention, you can create an experience that builds clarity, connection, and confidence from day one. And if you want help designing a 30, 60, 90 onboarding plan or system that really can help you scale, visit my website at www.hrdecoded.pro to learn more, or just book a strategy call with me. There's a link right on there where you can click, you can book time on my calendar, and I'm happy to help you out. And we'll be back next week with another episode of HR Decoded. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next time.